The cold wind howled across the frozen valley of Tarsis 12, a harsh, icy world far from Earth. Above, the sky was a swirling shade of deep purple, broken only by distant stars faintly twinkling through the thick atmosphere. The ground was covered in frost, and jagged ice formations jutted from the earth like sharp teeth. It was a place that tested every living being's will to survive. A group of young alien cadets stood nervously in a clearing, their bodies wrapped in thin training suits. These were the best students from different planets across the galaxy, gathered here for one of the toughest trials at the prestigious Galactic Survival Academy. Their teacher, Professor Varnath, a tall alien with leathery green skin and piercing yellow eyes, stood in front of them. His voice carried through their implants, translating into their native tongues. This final test will push you to your limits. You must survive one full rotation of this planet without any tools, no weapons, no fire starters, no technology, only what nature gives you. The cadets glanced at one another, faces filled with worry. Each species had its strengths. Some had tough scales, others had natural heat regulation, and a few even had small natural weapons. But none of them had ever faced the bitter cold of Tarsis 12 without tools to protect themselves. They shuffled their feet and began moving toward the scattered trees and rocky hills around the clearing. Professor Varnath's eyes narrowed as he turned to the last arrival. She was human, a rare and somewhat mysterious addition to the Academy. Her name was Corporal Mia Reyes. Unlike the others, she wore a simple, thin Academy jumpsuit that did little to guard against the chill. The professor's tone was sharp as he spoke directly to her through the translators. "Earthling, I suggest you quit now. This test will break you in less than an hour." Mia didn't respond with words. Instead, she simply nodded and turned to face the frozen wilderness ahead. The alien students immediately spread out, trying to find shelter or protection. One of the larger Drelock species began clawing at the frozen ground, desperate to dig a hole to hide in. A Zeranti with long, slender fingers tried to weave a crude shelter from icy vines and branches. But the cold was relentless, and their shelters were fragile and poorly made. Their bodies trembled as the temperature dropped rapidly. Mia disappeared into the nearby woods, her steps steady and purposeful. She didn't panic like the others. Instead, she trusted her instincts born from her upbringing on Earth, a planet known for its dangerous and unforgiving wilderness. She knew how to use what nature gave her. As the wind whipped through the trees, Mia gathered thick branches, breaking them with her hands and knees. She used sharp stones scattered on the ground to scrape bark from fallen logs. She worked silently, focused on her task. Slowly, she began stacking snow in layers to form a strong wall that would block the brutal wind. The other cadets watched her from afar, confused and doubtful. Back in orbit, Professor Varnath observed through his ship's surveillance systems. He felt sure the human would fail like all the others. His voice was filled with disbelief as he muttered, "She cannot survive here without tools." But the cameras showed something surprising. Mia was already using a primitive hand drill, made of vines and sticks, rubbing it against a dry piece of wood. Slowly, a tiny ember appeared, glowing faintly in the dark. The human's determination was clear. She blew gently on the ember until it grew into a flickering flame, the first fire of the trial. With fire, Mia's chances improved. She began, building a round log cabin with angled walls designed to cut through the wind. She even cut a small hole in the roof to serve as a chimney and packed snow around the walls for extra insulation. What amazed the others was the way she heated her shelter. Using heated stones placed in water, she created a simple but effective geothermal floor heater. It warmed the cabin from below, keeping the icy air outside. She worked tirelessly through the long night, not stopping even as frost began to form on her hair and eyelashes. Meanwhile, the other alien students struggled to keep warm. Their fragile shelters collapsed under the weight of ice and snow, and many huddled together, shivering and afraid. They whispered about the human who had vanished into the woods, unsure if she was even still alive. As dawn approached, the valley lay quiet, except for the sound of the wind. Mia's small cabin glowed softly with firelight inside, a beacon of warmth in the frozen wilderness. The other cadets were still fighting to survive, but something had changed. They could no longer deny the human's strength, her courage, or her deep connection to the wild. Professor Varneth clenched his fists as he stared at the screens. The human was rewriting the rules of the test, and perhaps the entire academy. What no one knew yet was that this was only the beginning of a much larger challenge that would test not just their skills, but their very will to live. The frozen woods around Tarsis 12 stretched endlessly, filled with towering alien trees covered in thick ice and heavy snow. The air was sharp and cold, each breath burning as it entered the lungs. Mia Reyes moved quietly but confidently through this harsh landscape. Her eyes scanned every detail, the shape of the trees, the texture of the bark, the patches of moss beneath the snow. She had faced tough environments before on Earth, and despite the cold biting at her skin, she knew survival depended on understanding nature and working with it, not against it. Her first task was to gather materials. With no tools allowed, she relied on her strength and skill. She bent sturdy branches with her bare hands, snapping them where they were weakest. She knelt to strip bark from fallen logs, peeling it carefully without breaking the thin layers. This bark would serve as insulation, trapping warmth inside the shelter she planned to build. Her fingers grew numb, but she worked quickly, knowing every moment counted. While other alien cadets struggled to build flimsy shelters or hid behind rocks, Mia's mind raced through everything she knew about shelter building. She remembered stories from her childhood about her ancestors who lived in cold forests, crafting cabins to survive brutal winters. Those stories were alive in her blood, fueling her determination. Without fire-starting tools, the hardest challenge was still ahead. But she didn't panic. She found a sturdy, dry branch and a piece of softwood, rubbing them together rapidly with her hands. The friction burned her palms and made them raw, but she pushed on. Her arms ached, sweat freezing on her forehead despite the cold. After what felt like hours, a tiny spark flickered at the edge of the wood. Carefully, she caught the spark in dry moss and blew softly, coaxing it to grow. Finally, a small flame flickered to life. It was fragile and weak, but it meant everything. Mia fed the fire with dry twigs and leaves, shielding it from the wind with her body. Soon the fire grew, casting a warm orange glow against the dark night. Now with fire, the real work began. She gathered logs from fallen trees, using sharp rocks to notch them so they fit tightly together. Her shelter took shape as a small round cabin, walls leaning slightly inward to protect from the fierce wind. She cut a small hole in the roof to serve as a chimney, ensuring smoke could escape and fresh air could enter. Snow was packed around the walls to seal gaps and add insulation, but Mia's greatest innovation was the floor. She collected large stones from the nearby stream and heated them carefully by the fire. Placing these stones inside a shallow pit beneath the cabin's floor, she poured water over them. The hot stones warmed the water, and the steam rose through small holes in the floorboards, creating a gentle, constant heat. This simple geothermal heating system kept the cabin warm all night, even as freezing air pressed outside. Back in the clearing, the alien cadets watched in amazement. They saw her cabin glowing softly in the distance, standing strong against the storm. They whispered among themselves, unable to believe one human could survive so well without any tools. Meanwhile, the temperature dropped dangerously low. The wind grew sharper, whipping through the trees with the sound of 1,000 ghosts. Some cadets shivered uncontrollably, their teeth chattering as they huddled together for warmth. Others tried to build new shelters, but collapsed from exhaustion. Despite the harsh conditions, Mia refused to stop. She took no breaks, tending the fire carefully and repairing any weak spots in her cabin. When her fingers grew stiff and numb, she pressed them close to the warm stones on the floor. Her breath came in steady puffs, clouds of mist disappearing into the cold night. As the hours passed, a strange calm settled over the valley. The wind howled outside, but inside her cabin Mia felt safe. The warmth wrapped around her like a shield. She made a small meal by melting snow and mixing it with edible roots she had gathered earlier. Eating quietly, she thought about the others, struggling in the cold, and hoped they would find their own strength soon. The stars blinked overhead, cold and distant, but to Mia, they felt like silent witnesses to her quiet fight. She knew this test was more than a challenge of survival. It was a battle of will and heart. By morning, the storm had eased. The purple sky began to lighten with the first pale rays of dawn. Mia's cabin stood firm, a glowing beacon in the frozen world. The other cadets had survived the night, but few could claim they had done so without injury or fear. Professor Varnath watched the live feed from orbit, a deep frown on his face. He had expected the human to fail quickly, like the others. Instead, he saw a strength and ingenuity that unsettled him. His voice was quiet, almost unwilling to admit it. She will not break. She may change everything. For Mia, this was only the beginning. The cold valley, the biting wind, and the alien wilderness were tough opponents. But her heart burned brighter than any fire, and her mind was sharp as a blade. She had faced death before, and she would face it again if she had to, because to her, survival was not just about staying alive. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. The sun rose higher over the frozen landscape of Tarsis 12, casting long, pale shadows across the snow-covered ground. The bitter cold was still there, biting at exposed skin and turning breath to mist. But something had changed in the air, a tense energy that hummed like the calm before a storm. The alien cadets gathered near the edge of the forest, their faces pale and their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and respect. Whispers spread quickly about the human who had built the heated cabin and survived the harsh night when so many of them had almost given up. Mia Reyes emerged from the trees, her cheeks flushed from the warmth of her cabin, her eyes clear and determined. The moment she stepped into the clearing, the group fell silent. The Dreylock, tall and muscular, shifted uncomfortably. The Zeranti, with their long limbs and sharp features, exchanged doubtful glances. None of them had seen a human, so strong and confident, especially without tools. Her presence challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and strength. Professor Varnath's voice echoed through the Academy's comm channels, his tone serious and sharp. Today, the challenge intensifies. You will face a greater threat, a storm unlike any you have seen before. Temperatures will drop even lower, and the wind will rage like a wild beast. You must survive through it with nothing but your shelters. This is the true test of your endurance and ingenuity. The cadets groaned, but there was no choice. They returned to their shelters, preparing as best they could. Many barely survived the first night, and now they faced an even deadlier challenge. Panic began to creep into their eyes. Mia, however, felt calm. She had studied weather patterns from Earth's harshest winters and understood how storms moved and grew. Her cabin was built strong and warm, but she knew she had to be ready. She gathered dry moss and extra branches to reinforce the walls. She collected snow and packed it around the base for better insulation. Using the hot stones beneath the cabin, she set up a small area to dry the moss, making it ready for quick repairs if the storm tore at her shelter. As the storm approached, dark clouds swirled above, blotting out the stars. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a furious beast. Snow whipped through the air in sharp, biting waves. The other cadets' shelters began to creak and groan under the pressure. Some collapsed, forcing their owners to flee into the cold or try to rebuild in the storm's fury. Shouts of frustration and pain echoed across the valley. Inside her cabin, Mia listened carefully. The wind roared outside, but her shelter held firm. She tended the fire, carefully feeding it, with twigs and dry leaves keeping the warmth alive. The geothermal heat from the stones below steamed gently, creating a small oasis of comfort amid the frozen chaos. Her breath came steady and calm as she wrapped herself in a blanket she had woven from thick moss and bark fibers. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Outside, the alien cadets struggled. The Zeranti tried to use their long claws to dig holes for shelter, but were quickly overwhelmed by the snow and cold. The Drelok attempted to gather rocks and fallen branches, but the storm scattered everything, and their muscles tired fast. In the freezing air, one by one, their shelters failed or became death traps. Desperation grew, and some began to call for rescue or help, but the harsh conditions made it impossible. As the hours dragged on, the storm reached its peak. Fierce gusts ripped at the trees, snapping branches and sending ice shards flying like deadly arrows. The temperature plunged even further, freezing exposed skin in seconds. The cadets, who had managed to survive, were pushed to their limits, some losing hope as the cold and exhaustion claimed them. But inside her cabin, Mia remained steady. She thought about her family back on Earth, about the tough lessons her father had taught her as a child. She remembered how they had survived freezing nights with nothing but grit and simple tools. Those memories gave her strength. She ran her hands over the walls, feeling the solid logs, the packed snow insulation, the carefully crafted chimney. Every detail was a promise of life. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the storm. A massive tree, weakened by the wind, crashed near the edge of the clearing. Its heavy branches smashed against some of the alien shelters, destroying them completely. The cadets inside screamed as they scrambled for safety in the blinding snow. Mia heard the cries through the storm. She grabbed a thick branch and rushed out, pulling her hood tight against the freezing wind. She moved quickly, finding the injured cadets and helping them toward her cabin. Her presence was like a beacon of hope in the blizzard. Despite their doubts and fears, the aliens followed her, trusting her strength. One by one, Mia helped them inside her warm cabin. She shared her fire, her blankets, and her hot water made from melting snow. The storm raged on outside, but inside they found refuge and comfort. The alien cadets looked at her with new eyes, not just as a competitor, but as a leader and a survivor. Professor Varneth watched from orbit, silent and thoughtful. He realized this test was no longer just about survival skills. It was about courage, unity, and the power of the human spirit. Mia had proven that even in the coldest, darkest moments, hope and strength could shine through. As the storm slowly began to pass, the survivors huddled together in the warm cabin. Outside, the frozen world was harsh and unforgiving, but inside, something new was born. A bond between different species, united by respect and the will to live. For Mia, this was more than a victory over the storm. It was a sign that humanity's resilience and heart could light the darkest nights and warm the coldest worlds. The storm had passed, but the world of Tarsis 12 was far from peaceful. The frozen landscape lay shattered in the wake of fierce winds and crashing trees. The air was sharp and cold, carrying a heavy silence that made every footstep sound loud in the quiet. Mia and the alien cadets who had taken refuge in her cabin emerged slowly, blinking in the pale daylight. Their breaths formed clouds in the air, and frost clung to their clothing and hair. The challenge was far from over. Professor Varneth's voice crackled over the comms again, cold and commanding. You have survived the storm. Now comes the final test. You must journey across the frozen valley to the safety of the base camp. No tools, no vehicles. Only what you carry and your own skills will save you. A murmur of shock and dread ran through the cadets. The distance was long, and the frozen ground was jagged with ice and fallen branches. Many feared they would not make it. Mia felt a spark of determination rise inside her. She had survived every trial so far, and she refused to fail now. She looked at the others, some limping, others still weak from the storm's bite. They needed a leader, someone who could guide them through this deadly journey. Mia stepped forward, her voice steady but strong. We will move together. We help each other. No one is left behind. The aliens exchanged glances, some skeptical, others quietly relieved. They began their trek through the frozen wilderness. Each step was a test of balance and strength as they navigated sharp ice and deep snowdrifts. The cold bit into their skin, and the wind howled again, though less fierce than before. Mia set the pace, moving steadily and scanning the terrain for danger. Her years of training and experience in harsh environments showed. She knew when to slow down and when to push forward. Hours passed as they fought through the icy landscape. They encountered dangers at every turn. One moment, a hidden patch of thin ice cracked beneath a Zerante's foot, nearly sending her plunging into freezing water. Quick hands caught her before she disappeared, and a shout of relief lifted the group's spirits. Later, a pack of wild frost beasts emerged from the trees, their fur covered in icicles, eyes glowing with hunger. The cadets froze in fear, but Mia stepped forward calmly, using a loud, steady shout to scare them away. Her confidence spread like fire, and the group pressed on, more united than ever. Fatigue weighed heavily on them as the sun began to dip low, painting the sky with cold. Shades of blue and purple, blisters and cuts slowed some cadets, and the cold drained their energy fast. Mia shared her rations, handing out small bites of dried food and melted snow to keep them going. She wrapped a weakened Dreylock in part of her blanket, whispering encouragement. They were not just survivors, they were a team. As night fell, they faced their greatest test yet. A deep ravine blocked their path, the edges slippery and sharp with ice. The base camp was just beyond, but this obstacle seemed impossible without tools or bridges. The group hesitated, fear threatening to freeze their hearts. Mia scanned the ravine carefully, spotting thick fallen branches half buried in the snow. With no tools, she used her strength to drag and position the branches across the gap, creating a rough, shaky bridge. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. One by one, the cadets crossed, gripping the branches tightly. Some slipped and caught themselves just in time. Others moved carefully, heart pounding. When the last of them made it safely, cheers rose into the cold night air. The base camp was close, lights flickering through the trees like beacons of hope. Exhausted but alive, the group stumbled into the camp. Warmth and shelter awaited, along with the approving looks of instructors and other cadets who had watched their progress from afar. Professor Varneth approached Mia, his face unreadable. "You have done what many thought impossible," he said slowly. "You led not only yourself, but others, through danger and despair. You have shown strength, courage, and heart. Humanity is a force the galaxy must reckon with." Mia felt a fierce pride, but also a quiet sadness. She had proven herself, yes, but the journey had cost them all. Some cadets were injured, others broken in spirit. Still, something new had formed. A bond of respect between species, a glimpse of what might be possible when different worlds worked together. As the fire crackled late into the night, Mia sat quietly, gazing at the stars beyond the camp. The cold planet was harsh and unforgiving, but she had brought warmth and hope to those frozen lands. The test was over, but the story was just beginning. The galaxy had witnessed the strength of a single human, and now it would have to watch what came next. The victory at the base camp brought a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. As the group rested and healed, word spread quickly across the galaxy about the human who had led alien cadets through impossible conditions without tools and with sheer will. Many were amazed, but others grew uneasy. Among them were powerful forces who doubted humanity's place in the galactic order. Not all saw humans as just survivors. They saw them as a rising threat. From the shadows, rival factions began plotting to test humanity's limits in far more dangerous ways. Mia and her group received a sudden, urgent message from the Galactic Academy. A fleet of unknown warships had appeared at the outer rim near the sector where the Academy was located. These ships belonged to the feared Kargath, a ruthless alien species known for conquering and enslaving worlds. The fleet was massive and heavily armed, and its arrival sent shockwaves through the political and military ranks of the galaxy. The Kargath demanded the surrender of the Academy and all its students. They wanted to crush the rising threat they saw in the young cadets, especially the human who had already drawn so much attention. The Academy's leaders scrambled to organize a defense, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Panic and fear rippled through the cadets. Many doubted their ability to stand against such overwhelming power, but Mia, now recognized as a leader, refused to let despair win. She gathered her fellow cadets, their injuries barely healed, and spoke with fierce determination. "We have faced death before and survived. We are not just students, we are warriors. We will defend this place and show the galaxy what humanity and its allies are made of." The alien cadets, inspired by Mia's courage and the memory of the storm, rallied behind her. They trained harder, preparing for battle with whatever they had. Weapons were scarce, but they used their environment to their advantage. The icy terrain became a fortress, with traps and defensive positions built from the frozen ground and fallen debris. Mia worked alongside engineers and tacticians, using her knowledge of human combat and guerrilla tactics to plan an ambush that could level the playing field. When the Kargath fleet entered the sector, the battle began with a thunderous roar. Starships clashed in deadly combat above the frozen planet, lasers cutting through the black sky, explosions lighting the void like fireworks of destruction. The Academy's ships were smaller and fewer, but their pilots fought with unmatched skill and bravery. Mia watched from the command center, heart pounding as she coordinated ground defenses and sent out teams to sabotage enemy landing parties. On the surface, the cold wind mixed with the sounds of battle, shouts, gunfire, and the distant rumble of engines. The Kargath warriors landed in force, heavily armored and merciless. They charged toward the Academy's perimeter, confident in their power. But Mia and her team had prepared well. Hidden traps snared the invaders. Icy pits concealed deadly spikes, and ambush squads struck from behind snowdrifts and rocky outcrops. Every step was a fight for survival. Despite their courage, the cadets were pushed back by sheer numbers. The Kargath advanced relentlessly, breaking through defenses and forcing the defenders to retreat closer to the Academy's core buildings. Mia fought alongside her comrades, using a salvaged energy rifle to hold off attackers. Her breath came in, quick gasps as she fired, ducked, and moved with practiced precision. Around her, alien cadets fell, some wounded, others fighting with fierce desperation. At a critical moment, a Kargath commander, a towering figure clad in black armor with glowing red eyes, appeared on the battlefield. He targeted Mia, recognizing the human leader who had become a symbol of defiance. The two clashed in brutal hand-to-hand combat, exchanging blows that shook the ground. Mia's strength, speed, and determination matched the commander's ferocity, but he had the advantage of size and weaponry. Just as the fight seemed to tip in the commander's favor, Mia's fellow cadets launched a surprise attack. Using improvised explosives, they distracted the commander long enough for Mia to land a decisive blow. The alien staggered back, wounded but defiant, and retreated with a snarl. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. Inspired by the victory, the defenders rallied with renewed energy. The Kargath forces, surprised by the cadets' resilience and cunning, began to falter. Starship pilots seized the moment, coordinating precise strikes that crippled the enemy's support ships and forced a retreat. The frozen world echoed with cheers and cries of relief as the invaders withdrew. In the aftermath, Mia stood among her comrades, weary but victorious. The battle had tested them all, pushing limits they never thought they had. The Academy had survived, and humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question of survival. It was a statement of power and promise. The scars of war would heal, but the story of how a human built a heated cabin in a frozen world and then led an alliance to victory would be told for generations to come. The war was over, but the galaxy was forever changed. The Kargath retreat left a clear message. Humanity was no longer a weak species to be ignored or underestimated. The Academy was rebuilt, stronger and better equipped, with allies from many worlds coming to learn from the humans' example. Mia, once just a student struggling through a shelter-building test, had become a symbol of hope and strength across the stars. But even as peace settled, new challenges waited in the shadows. Mia stood on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt campus, the frozen world still wrapped in icy silence. The stars above twinkled cold and bright. She thought about everything that had happened: the brutal storm, the impossible tests, the fierce battles against the Kargath, and the lives lost along the way. Her heart ached with memories, but also burned with a fierce pride. She had proved that humans could survive, build, fight, and lead, even against the deadliest odds. Around her, alien cadets and instructors moved with purpose and respect. Many came to ask her questions or seek her advice. Mia shared what she had learned about teamwork, courage, and never giving up. She knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and many threats still lurked beyond the stars. But now humanity had a voice and a place at the table. Suddenly, an urgent message arrived. Sensors had detected a mysterious signal from deep space, a message unlike any before, full of strange energy patterns and unknown language. The galaxy's leaders gathered quickly, realizing this could be either a call for help or a warning of something worse. Mia volunteered to lead the new mission to investigate. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey into deep space was tense and full of unknowns. Mia and her crew traveled through wormholes and across star systems, following the mysterious signal. Along the way, they faced new challenges, from dodging asteroid fields to avoiding pirate attacks. Each obstacle tested their skills and unity. Mia's leadership shone brightest in these moments, inspiring her team to push forward. Finally, they reached a forgotten star system, where an ancient alien structure floated silently in space. It was massive, covered with strange symbols that pulsed with energy. The team docked and entered the structure, discovering advanced technology beyond anything they had imagined. The walls told stories of a lost civilization and a great war long past, one that had nearly destroyed entire galaxies. They explored. The team triggered a warning system, and the structure began to activate defenses. Mia and her crew fought through traps and robotic guardians, using wit and teamwork to survive. The tension was high, and every step brought them closer to uncovering the truth behind the signal. At the heart of the structure, they found a chamber containing a powerful device, a star core generator capable of unimaginable energy output. It was clear this technology could either save or destroy worlds. The message they had received was a plea to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. Maya made the difficult decision to secure the device and bring it back to the Academy for study, knowing that this discovery could change the balance of Power in the galaxy. As they prepared to leave, a shadowy figure appeared, a guardian AI left behind by the ancient civilization. It tested Mia's resolve, questioning her intentions and strength. After a tense negotiation, the AI recognized Mia's courage and honesty. It entrusted her with the Star Core, warning that great responsibility came with such power. Mia accepted the burden without hesitation. She knew that humanity had earned a new role, not just as survivors or fighters, but as protectors of peace and knowledge. Returning to the academy, Mia and her team were greeted as heroes. The galaxy watched with hope and admiration as humans took their place among the stars, ready to face new challenges and build a future together. The heated cabin on Tarsus 12, once a simple shelter, had sparked a journey that changed everything. Mia looked up at the stars one last time before turning away, knowing that the adventure was far from over. Humanity's story had only just begun, and the galaxy was ready to listen.